All right, welcome back, everyone. We are diving right back into our history of Iran. And for part two, we're doing something really special. We're going to leave those famous empires for a little while and travel way, way back in time. I mean, back to the very dawn of civilization in this incredible land.
Long before the names that we all know, like Cyrus the Great or Darius, before the people we call the Aryans even arrived on the scene, and even before the name Iran itself was ever spoken, a civilization lived. A powerful, sophisticated, and incredibly resilient culture that thrived for millennia. They are, quite literally, the foundation of this entire story.
So, here's what we've got on tap for our journey today. First, we'll get properly introduced to the Elamites. Then, we'll map out their world, including their very famous and sometimes very difficult neighbors. We're going to debunk a few common myths along the way. Then, we'll dive deep into what made them tick, the Elamite soul. And finally, we'll see how their long story reached both an end and a powerful new beginning.
Okay, let's get right to it. Our story begins with a name you need to know, Elam. And let me be clear, this isn't some legend or a myth from a dusty book. We're talking about one of the oldest, documented civilizations in all of human history, a true powerhouse that lasted for more than 2,500 years.
Just take a second to let that sink in. 2,500 years. For that entire time, Elam was a major player on the ancient world stage. They went toe-to-toe with the legendary cities of Sumer, they had these epic rivalries with the Babylonians, and their cultural DNA was so strong that it was eventually inherited and woven into the fabric of the great Achaemenid Persian Empire itself.
So, to really get a handle on Elam, we have to ask a couple of basic questions. First, where exactly were they? And second, who were they living next to? Because, trust me, their neighborhood was, well, let's just say it was complicated.
Okay, so take a look at this map. Elam was nestled in the southwest of what we now call the Iranian Plateau. But what's so critical about this location is that it wasn't just some random piece of land. It was the exact meeting point, the frontier, between two totally different worlds. The highlands of Iran on one side and the fertile river plains of Mesopotamia on the other. This position made them the ultimate gatekeepers for everything, trade, ideas, and of course, war.
Now, this unique location brings us to a question that I get all the time. We hear all these famous names from ancient history, Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and because they were constantly interacting with Elam, it's really easy to wonder, were they all just part of the same big, ancient Iranian world?
The short, simple, and historically accurate answer to that question is a big, clear no.
See, these civilizations were Elam's neighbors, not its family. They were all located over in Mesopotamia, the famous land between the rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, and that whole region corresponds to modern-day Iraq. You had Sumer down in the south, Akkad and Babylon right in the middle, and the fearsome Assyrians up north. They were Elam's rivals, its trading partners, and very often its enemies, living right next door.
And believe me, this proximity created what has to be one of history's longest and most intense neighborhood disputes. For thousands of years, they were locked in this endless cycle of constant war followed by constant trade, back and forth. And what's so wild is that a huge chunk of what we even know about Elam today comes directly from the records of their Mesopotamian neighbors, all meticulously written down on clay tablets that, luckily for us, survive the ages.
So, a natural next question is, did these powerful neighbors ever manage to cross the Zagros Mountains and actually occupy parts of Iran? Well, for the most part, no. The influence from Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon was almost always external. The big exception, though, was Assyria. The Assyrians definitely made raids and short-term incursions into western Iran, but these were more like smash-and-grab operations to get plunder and then retreat, not permanent occupations.
All right, so let's tackle another big misconception here. It's so easy to just focus on the Elam-Mesopotamia rivalry and imagine that the rest of the gigantic Iranian plateau was just empty, uninhabited land. Nothing could be further from the truth.
The land was absolutely buzzing with different cultures. Let's take a quick virtual tour, shall we? Over in the southeast, you had the mysterious Giraffe civilization, which might actually be older than Elam, and they were known for their mind-blowing stone art.
Further east, you had the city of Sharhe-Sukte, the Burt City, which was a highly advanced planned urban center where archaeologists have found evidence of early brain surgery. Yes, you heard that right. And then over in the western Zagros Mountains, you had powerful peoples like the Lulubi, the Gutians, and the Kassites.
And this is where the story gets really interesting, because influence was not a one-way street from Mesopotamia to Iran. In one of history's truly amazing reversals, the Kassites, one of those mountain peoples from Iran, swept down from the Zagros, conquered the great city of Babylon, and actually ruled it for several centuries. A people from the Iranian Plateau became the kings of Mesopotamia. How incredible is that?
So now that we've got the lay of the land and we've met the neighbors, let's zoom in and focus on the Elamites themselves. Like, who were these people? What made them unique? What was their language, their religion, their whole culture like?
First, something really crucial about how they were organized. Elam didn't have just one single permanent capital city for its entire history. The center of power actually shifted around over time. It started in a place called Awan, then it moved up into the mountains to Shimashuki, then over to Anshan. But the most famous and enduring capital was the great city of Susa, which became so important that it remained a major center of power for centuries, long after Elam as an independent state was gone.
Now, one of the most fascinating things about the Elamites is their language. It's what linguists call a language isolate. That means it had no known relationship to any other language family around it, not to the Semitic languages like Akkadian over in Mesopotamia, and not to the Indo-European languages like Persian that would show up much later. It's like a linguistic ghost, a completely unique window into the deep history of the region's people, and it shows just how well they maintained their own core identity.
And if you need any more proof of just how important this language was, get this. Centuries after Elam stopped being an independent political power, its language was still so vital, so essential, that the Achaemenid Persian Empire, the empire of Cyrus and Darius, made Elamite one of its 3 official languages. They carved it into their monuments right alongside their own Old Persian and the prestigious Babylonian. Its legacy didn't just survive, it was honored.
Okay, so what do the Elamites believe? Well, they were polytheistic, meaning they worshipped many gods. Their main god was a deity named Inshushenak, which literally meant Lord of Susa. He was the divine protector of their most important city. They also had other key deities like Kirisha and Naparisha, and their beliefs definitely included a concept of the afterlife, complete with detailed rituals for burial and sacrifice.
And if you want to see their faith and their incredible ingenuity made real, you don't have to imagine it. You just have to look at this, the magnificent ziggurat of Chogha Zanbil. This is a real place, a living document made of millions of bricks that you can still see today.
So this massive temple complex was built way back in the 13th century BC by a king named Naparisha, and it was an absolute marvel of engineering. It wasn't just visually stunning, it actually featured an advanced water purification system built right into it. Today, it's a protected UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it stands there like a direct message from the Elamite world, speaking to us across a gap of more than 3,300 years. All right, so now we come to the final chapter of Elam's story as an independent power. And it's got everything: a dazzling peak, a devastating fall, and a legacy that simply refused to die.
Elam hit its absolute zenith under a dynasty known as the Shutrukits. And to give you a real sense of their power, just consider the actions of their king, Shutruk Nahute. In the 12th century BC, he marched his army right into Mesopotamia, sacked the mighty city of Babylon, and took their most precious treasures, including the legendary law code of Hammurabi. And brought them all back to Susa as trophies of war. That is a serious power move. But, as we know from history, fortunes in the ancient world could turn on a dime, and often with brutal speed. About 500 years after that Elamite triumph over Babylon, the tables were turned completely. In 640 BC, the notoriously ruthless Assyrian king Ashurbanipal led his armies against Elam and just utterly devastated the city of Susa.
Now, here's the most important point to understand about this moment. Ashurbanipal's invasion marked the end of Elam as an independent political state. But, and this is a huge but, it was not the end of the Elamite people or their culture. Their cities, like Susa, were eventually rebuilt. Their unique language continued to be spoken. Their identity endured, forming the cultural bedrock upon which the next great chapter of this land's history would be built.
So, what came next?
As the Elamite state began to fade from the political map, new groups of people were migrating onto the Iranian Plateau from the north and from the east. These were Indo-European-speaking peoples who, in the historical texts, are often referred to as the Aryans. Their arrival and their eventual mixing with that ancient Elamite foundation would create something entirely new, setting the stage for the rise of the Medes and ultimately the Persians. And that is where our story is going next.